Normal people become terrified of criminals.
Shots were just fired. Police just came out and told us, and we're headed there right now.
They become terrified of their own government.
Nashville school shooter Audrey Hale's manifesto leaked. Trans murderer vowed to kill privileged white kids at Covenant School. Stephen Crowder leaked photos of the manifesto on Twitter and his podcast. Nashville PD has refused to release the information despite media requests. Hale, 28, shot and killed 6 people, including 3 young kids. I believe they were all under the age of 9. On March 23rd, she was shot dead by police within 14 minutes of launching the attack. Now, the big story with this release is information about the motivations. It would seem that from what we have so far, the motivation was anti-white hatred. There are some reports that the full manifesto, the full notebook, actually contains way more. And some people are saying actually the full thing shows this individual hated everybody. But if that were true, they would need to release this to the public. Now, I don't know that's going to happen, but perhaps for whatever reason, this got leaked. It was to try and force the release of the rest of it, which I kind of don't know if that makes sense because whoever leaked it could have just leaked the rest. We don't know exactly why only these select pages were released. And I got to be honest, I'm also not convinced there is any more. That may be an excuse where someone's trying to downplay what this individual had actually been motivated by. We have this from the Post-Millennial. Local media outlet confirms Nashville trans school shooters anti-white manifesto pages are authentic. And then we have, of course, an investigation is currently underway after release of alleged Covenant shooters' writings, Nashville mayor says. So it's confirmed now. I believe we have multiple reporters confirming this, that the individual was motivated by anti-white hatred. And now all of a sudden we're starting to see these videos pop up. People are basically, and they've been doing this for a while, but they're making montages of all of the insane college professor and university rhetoric around violence targeting white people. And there was one that I saw on Twitter that's so shocking and insane. It's no wonder people are being radicalized by this. People are also calling out Joe Biden, who has made numerous speeches about the problems and dangers of white supremacy. Now, you can certainly argue that people are allowed to criticize and condemn white supremacy. Of course they are. But when these universities and media outlets claim that simply having a family is white supremacy, you can see how the rhetoric starts getting crazy. Now, I guess the questions are, was the FBI and were the police withholding this intentionally because of what it contained, or is something else going on?
Yeah, it's hard to say. I mean, there's a line in particular from one of the photograph pages that says, I've been wanting to do this for a long time. I'm excited. I almost got caught, and I believe they say the summer of 2021. And so we have to wonder why does this person feel that way? There was reporting that Audrey Hale had been, under her parents' care to a certain level, that there were emotional and psychological issues already known to at least her family. But this to me implies something bigger than just, people were concerned about my behavior.
Which implies that there's more to the writings than just the 3 pages. I mean, if she's been planning this thing for a couple of years or had issues for a couple of years, and she's wrote about how excited for the past 2 weeks that she's been.
Right.
So I bet she was writing every day for the 2 weeks doing her sort of...
And there's also a report there may be a 14-minute video.
Yeah. I wouldn't be surprised. I mean, Audrey Hale also reached out to people right before.
I'm sorry, 10-minute video. I got wrong.
That's okay.
That is okay.
I approve. It's okay. I forgive your 4-minute lapse. No, the thing is, if there had been I wouldn't be surprised if there's a video. I mean, especially with younger millennial attackers, they're more versed in social media now than ever. And so it makes sense that would be the case. I know Audrey Hale was contacting people through Instagram right before going into the school. I mean, this person was reaching out and also being extremely destructive to their fellow human beings. One of the pages, if I'm remembering correctly, was dated, I think, February of 2023. And so we know that this, manifesto, diary, whatever you want to call it, has been documenting a developing motivational pattern.
I don't think this was withheld because it was implicating the left in their radical rhetoric. I think when you look at this, you see 2 things. As you mentioned, the shooter said, I almost got caught, and also says, I'm going to be checking security. What does this tell us? The police state, the centralized policing authority, will not be there to protect you from these circumstances. And in fact, there was this was posted on Twitter in a community notes. There's a study done in 2022 that found 34.4% of mass shootings were stopped by a person who is legally armed. And when you remove gun-free zones from that metric, it increases to 51% of mass shootings stopped by individuals who are legally armed. And I think the problem here is with this manifesto, what you see is, I think we got to be careful about the anti-white propaganda angle to this, which is important. I'm not saying it's not. We should definitely call out the weird, creepy, racist, leftist, whatever, but also consider this is hugely damaging to the narrative of gun-free zones, to local politicians. If the narrative came out that gun-free zones, and this is true, everyone knows this, that gun-free zones are creating risk, but it was like the headline story, Manifesto reveals lack of security, gun-free zones, and lack of FBI integrity resulted in this happening, you're going to have people going to their politicians and be like, why did you do this? So when you look at how the FBI has... what's the meme now? Was known to the FBI. They say they do the Bart meme where it's like, say the line, Bart, and he's like, the shooter was known to the FBI.
right. They're always on a list.
Every time there's always an opportunity. But what happens is you get gun control activists coming out and saying, aha, we must blame the guns, which is a complete distraction. I don't think it is always about gun control. I think it is about, people are going to get mad at us because we're the ones who created this system and made it this way. Right now, what you've got happening is Democrats arguing that we should have politicians do a thing, when in reality, it's politicians, mainly Democrats, doing the thing which resulted in the crisis in the first place, and they don't want anyone to realize that.
Yeah, I think that's right. I think the other aspect that's jumped out of me was that there's a very serious anti-elitist messaging throughout this. There's a specific line where Hale writes, those kids are awful at their private school with their parents' expensive cars or whatever it is, And from what I know, reporting I saw from local outlets said that Hale had attended this school. And so this behavior is bizarre in a lot of fronts. And I think now it's just a rush to spin it as fast as possible. I think that's why the anti-gun narrative is going to be so easily introduced here. But it's also important to acknowledge that this person was deeply psychologically disturbed. And if people knew this, FBI, local law enforcement, whatever, they failed the community around them.
It's weird to me that the manifesto hadn't been digitized by the perpetrator, because so often when we see events like this, part of the motive is to get it out as fast as possible. But obviously it never been digitized because there's spelling errors and stuff in it. I mean, this is something that was like not on the internet at all, I don't think, and was just written for personal use. So I wonder what Hale was seeking to accomplish by writing this down.
Well, I'll tell you what the scary thing I think is when we talk about civil conflict in the United States, I often mention that I view the right as what I would call like the acute threat, whereas the left is the blunt or obtuse threat.
The chronic threat, you could say.
Well, it's not so much
That's
chronic.
how disease works, acute and chronic.
It's not chronic. It is blunt versus
sharp.
Pointed and sharp. When
Piercing versus bludgeoning.
Right. Acute meaning it's extreme and it hits you hard, whereas blunt is the left, you get hundreds of thousands of far left extremists. They go around punching and threatening people. None of these rise to a national level news story, but it's happening all the time to the point where you're getting shoplifting, you're getting these protests and occupations, and they bubble up sometimes and make the news, but it's never the most shocking story. With the right, you get some deranged lunatic going into a church. I shouldn't say the right, but what they would say is the right. What I should say is anti-left or anti-government, whatever you want to call it. And then as for the left, I think we're speaking in generalities. We should probably, I don't know if the simplification of left and right is helping for anybody, because this person's clearly not a leftist. You know what I mean? They're not a communist necessarily. Well, they probably are deeply influenced by it. But anyway, my point is this. What is typically stated by the right, by the media as the right, it's like rarely, and one guy, a lone wolf, does some crazy thing, killing a lot of people, makes international headlines, and everyone says, we must stop the right, they're so dangerous. And it's bad. It's seriously bad and does need to be stopped, however we can. On the left, you have the Chaz Chop protest, you have the Autonomous Zone in Minneapolis, you have the Summer of Love protests, you have the 529 insurrection. All of these things result in severe injuries and sometimes death. But what ends up happening? In the Summer of Love, you have mass riots across the entire country, 30 people die, but you don't have one person killing 30 people.
Right.
So the media doesn't treat the story like a mass death incident, even though it was. Mm-hmm. And because of that, so what's scary to me is what we're now seeing is more left ideologically aligned individuals engaging in what I would describe as acute terror and violence and extremism. And when you combine when you take a left ideological bent like this, ramp the extremism up to 11, combine it with the fact that there's hundreds of thousands of these people, and they have already engaged in mass death incidents, it's like, that's starting to get much, much scarier. The
Yeah.
right doesn't protest. They barely ever go out
You
and
don't
march.
see a lot of left wingers walking around with ARs or assault weapons.
You
so
do.
Much, I mean, now you do at some of these protests, but this is sort of like a new development.
In Seattle over the past probably 7 years, leftists like the John Brown Gun Club
Yeah.
and the Red Guard or whatever they call themselves, they march around with AR-15s, and they've even been pointing them at vehicles and controlling traffic.
Saw that happen in Austin with that guy that went to prison for defending
Right.
himself when it happened to him.
And so what we're starting to see over the past few years is the left has this ubiquitous fervor where they go out and smash things and destroy things, and now they're adding to their ranks serious violent extremists who are engaging in. I mean, this was earlier in the year, and the right still doesn't have, on average, any of the low-level terror. Doesn't even have that much high-level terror. I think the reality is what is described as the right probably is just regular people, and what is described as the left is an activist base.
It's also this person, Audrey Hale, was like on some sort of pharmaceutical. Is this confirmed? I mean, a lot of these mass shooters are on some sort of SSRI or pharmaceutical?
I'd be
Too long
willing
since I read
to
the story, but I think that there was
Yeah.
a therapist at one point, wasn't there? I can't remember.
I don't know for sure, but I think it's a logical assumption, especially because SSRIs are widely prescribed.
What's deadlier, an
especially for
AR-15 or an SSRI?
It's
Well, that's not a real. There's no real.
The pen is
metric,
mightier than the
right?
sword. They say that. That's been quoted long. You know,
The pill is mightier than the gun.
Warp the mind, and then the
Depends
guns.
on. I would. You could theoretically argue that it is unfair to call an AR-15 deadly in any respect.
Right. Well, I would say that a gun is more likely to help you commit suicide, and an SSRI is more likely to help you kill a bunch of people before you commit suicide.
Well, so the issue is SSRIs could result in complete generational collapse. If you have mind-altering drugs being mass-produced and mass-prescribed, it could actually destroy the fabric of a nation. Whereas a rifle, which is a weapon, it's an object intended to be destructive, could actually help protect and defend a nation or destroy a nation. So it's actually kind of neutral in that regard. Either way, you can say it's deadly. That's the intent of it. But if the goal of the AR is to actually stabilize, that is to say, what do they say? An armed society is a polite society.
Mm-hmm.
You may actually have weapons, but everyone's like, you must respect other people because they're armed and you don't want to start a fight. And that actually simmers things down. Whereas mind-altering drugs can actually just make everything go nuclear, within a few years.
Yeah, especially because you don't know how people will react to them. I mean, some people can take SSRIs for a long time and see minimal side effects. Other people become more unstable because of them. It's impossible to say, and that's the gamble we take in a pharmacologically dependent society.
And
that's
all the unstable people are more likely to be prescribed them too. So it could be that
Exactly.
you're nuts before you get on it, and then there's this correlation that isn't causation.
Exactly. I think that's a really good point, actually. A lot of people are like, aha, this person was on medication. Yeah, maybe they're trying to stop them.
Right.
Like, maybe they were like, hey, maybe this is,
That's the thing. It's very, very hard to tell how people react to medications. It's not that there's never a case for them. Some people legitimately need them. It's a trial and error. They just give you pills and see if it works. And if they don't, we try and adjust. I mean, that's unfortunately how this works.
I think it's actually a really good point. The argument that, the person was on SSRIs, it's the medication, is as similar to the
false
liberal
correlation.
argument where they're like, they had a gun, it's the gun.
Yeah, right.
Right? And there are a lot of people, I think there's probably tens of
Audrey Hale
millions.
was vaccinated and boosted.
Right, yeah, exactly.
Like, okay.
You could isolate anything.
Figured it out now.
Probably a fair point to say there are a lot of people who are taking SSRIs who are not doing this.
I hope
Of course there are. I mean, they're so widely prescribed, and
Right.
we don't have this doesn't happen all the time. I mean, this is tragic. And part of what's shocking about this is because it's so unusual, right? She's a female killer. Perhaps she doesn't think of herself that way, but a female killer who attacks somewhere that they have ties to. I mean, this is unusual for both for female attackers and for school shootings. I feel like there's more of an anonymous component a lot of times when you get mass shooters.
like some sort of endocrine disruption or something.
Or just generally, like this is someone who is behaving in a way that we don't see. I mean, statistically, mass shooters are male. And I guess depends on how you classify this person.
I hope
Let's-
this
let's-
refocuses the conversation to the dangers of racial supremacy and not white supremacy or black supremacy or Jewish supremacy or Islamic, like Arab supremacy. It's about racial supremacy and how horrible it is to think of that and to focus on that and to live in that state of mind where you think one race is trying to be superior. Like, just don't be a racist.
Well, you can actually extrapolate that further and just say the real issue is any ideology that would propose extremist solutions to their perceived problems. And so for this individual,
How do you define extremists, though? I mean,
someone willing to kill a bunch of people to impose their political will.
that makes sense.
Now, to be fair, people.
I think
hold
that's
on.
But they
US
throw it around a
military.
lot. Like
But
if you're
now,
against abortion, you're an
I can-
extremist. You know,
I can already hear the leftists going, "Oh, so what you're saying? The U.S. government's extremists?" Yes, yes, I am. Yeah, when they're blowing up kids overseas to enact their goals, and the American people overwhelmingly say no every single time they're asked, and consistently vote for the politician who's like, "No war." That being said, Nikki Haley seems to be doing well in the polls to a certain degree. But most Americans, the overwhelming majority, are like, hey, we don't want to waste money on war. So yes, there are extremists in our government willing to kill people to get what they want. Thanks for watching this clip from the Timcast IRL podcast. Hang out with us live Monday through Friday at 8 p.m. and become a member over at timcast.com for uncensored, members-only shows exclusive. Thanks for hanging out, and we'll see you all next time.